So, good morning or good night, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to another interview of The Shield on a Couch. I'm your host, Hector. And tonight I'm joined by Simon Hawemann. I don't
Mhm.
know, did I say your last name correctly?
Pretty good. It's Havemann, but
Hawemann.
most English-speaking people say Hallman, and I'm fine with that too. Whatever works.
Yeah. And we're here because he's the guitar player from the band Nightmare.
Hmm.
And they're about to release an album on May 5th. And it's gonna be a huge release for metal. And we're here all to talk about the new album that you guys have been working on. So first of all, how are you tonight?
Pretty good. I am about to fly out to Los Angeles for NAMM, so the music instrument convention. So I still have to pack. I'm a little bit, typical travel preparation stress, but it's not too bad. I'm traveling pretty light, so just looking forward to get out there and have some fun.
Yeah, that's this weekend, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that should be fun. That's always fun, and you get
Yep.
to meet other musicians. Have you been to more than one of those events in the past?
Yeah, I went probably 6 or 7 times already, maybe 5 times. I don't know. I The first time I went was 10 years ago, actually. That was my first NAMM. And then I think since 2017 through 2020, right before the pandemic, I went every single year. And now this is my first time back after the pandemic restrictions or whatever you want to, call it. So it's yeah, it's my first time in a while, and I'm looking forward to it.
So when you go to those conventions, what exactly do? Because I've never been to one. What exactly do you guys do? Do you like play instruments? Do you give like tutorials? What exactly happens at NAMM? I know I've seen videos, but I've never been to one.
So most of all, it's really a technically it's a business to business convention. So all the big music instrument brands show their new products for the year, and there's typically a lot of retailers, dealers, and representatives of those retailers that basically check out the new gear to get a feel for what they want to sell through their stores. But it's also always a good opportunity for musicians to get some face time with the brands that they're working with. I've been working with ESP guitars for a couple years now, and it's one of the rare occasions where you don't just email, where you
Mhm.
actually get to go and meet people and check out the new stuff. So that's always cool. Occasionally musicians do play on the convention floor, or sometimes they're like after show events in the venues around Los Angeles. So there's usually like a plethora of things going on around just the convention. But yeah, it's a good opportunity to meet a lot of people that you don't meet so often, other musicians from other bands and from across the world. It's always like a good time, honestly.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm looking at the background at the guitar you have over there. It looks super cool. Is that the one day the like the Dimebag one, right? Like the
No, that guitar is a ESP custom shop guitar that I had built um in 2021. It took about 17 months to get finished. It was built in Japan from the custom shop. It was my first like real ESP custom shop guitar, so it was a very exciting
wow.
process.
So,
But yeah, it's pretty incredible.
so did you use that one to record or is that one that you don't want to touch that much?
I did not use it to record because I didn't have it at the time we wrote and recorded the album. I will use it for future recordings. I will probably never take it on tour. It's a little bit too expensive for that.
Yeah,
But it's
I
gonna
would
be, yeah, it's
I,
gonna be
I wouldn't
a
take it on
studio
tour.
guitar basically.
Yeah, just imagine like having that stolen or something. No, no, I would
Yeah.
not take it on tour as well. So yeah, let's talk about the upcoming album, shall we? So
Uh-huh.
I know that this album you were before with Season of Mist,
Hmm.
and you formed your own label. How was that transition from being in Season of Mist to forming your own label?
Well, it was honestly an interesting one. It just kind of felt like the right time to do something different because I've had released albums through you know, labels like Season of Mist, or when I was still in Europe through Life Force Records. And while it always helps to work with a bigger label, because, you know, in the eyes of, I guess, the public and the industry, it kind of legitimizes a band to a certain degree. But at the same point, you kind of give up the ability to make money off of music sales. I've put out 5 albums on you know, bigger labels, and I never got a royalty check for that, right? So with the changing landscape of the music industry and indie music industry, we just kind of felt like, okay, you know, like we're at a point now, we have worked at this for long enough to kind of understand the ins and outs of the music industry well enough to do something ourselves that wouldn't necessarily be lost in the shuffle, you know. Our drummer also works for a label that's based out of Germany, Pelagic Records. So he has some experience. Our other guitarist, Keith, has released music independently always, basically. And yeah, so it was just kind of, I think things just came full circle, and we decided to take that step. And yeah, at first the label was just supposed to be kind of like a label imprint that only releases, you know, Nightmare's music and maybe re-releases my old band's music on vinyl or whatever fun formats, you know. And then the pandemic hit, and it was just I just kind of felt like, hey, I could do more with this, you know. And I started talking to other bands from, you know, similar genres, and bands that I thought were a good fit with Nightmare and the idea and philosophy behind the label. And it just kind of started from there. And here we are now. I think I'm going on 100 releases or something in 3 years. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that is very impressive. And do having your own label to putting out your own music, is it more like freeing because you can do you know, you basically can do what you want to do because it's your own label? So how's that sense of freedom of having that you didn't have before?
Yeah, it actually is a big deal to me, because I feel like there's a lot more flexibility involved, right? When you work with a bigger label, obviously they work with dozens, sometimes hundreds of bands, and they have their schedules, and wherever you fit into the schedule, that's just kind of, you know, how it goes. You have to kind of find your place in the schedule. And then sometimes, you know, you finish an album and it takes 5 months until the first single even comes out. And with a label that is our size, we're a little bit more flexible. And in all technicality, as a band and label in one, if we wanted to, we could go and record a song today and release it tomorrow. We have that freedom now. And we haven't done exactly that, but we've tried different things, you know, of releasing music. Sometimes we just didn't tell people anything, and then boom, there was a new song, you know. And people were basically surprised. Or, you know, with this album, we're doing a slightly more traditional release campaign with a couple of lead-up singles and before the album release and whatnot. But yeah, it just kind of gives us the flexibility to try different things and see what really works and what works for us and how it's enjoyable to us and effective, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion because yeah, I've seen bands do the same opposite. Like for example, a few years ago, I remember when Avenged Sevenfold just released an album completely and didn't say anything, and it kind of backfired a little bit.
Okay.
But then there's the other route, the bands that when the album is dropping, you already heard like more than half the album. Like a few years ago, I remember like Slipknot was putting out an album, I think Chapter 4 or something. And when the album came out, it was like 12 songs, and we have already heard like 8 or 9 songs. And
Wow.
I'm like, where's the surprise? Like you already, like when the album drops, you already dropped. So it's the two sides. I know you guys released 4 singles, but 4 singles, it's you know, it's normal nowadays. I think back in the day, bands released like 2 to 3 singles when
Correct.
they want to promote an album. So the singles that you release, I know that you have a music video, and the last single you put out was Brutalist Imperator, which starts the album, by the way. That is called Deformity Adrift. I didn't say the name of the album. That's a great album opener. What does that like for you, having an album opener? Is it like, like what are the key ingredients you want in an album opener?
Honestly, it's very rare that while we're writing an album that we're trying to write an opener, right?
Yeah.
We usually we just kind of we try to figure out what we want out of a song without thinking. I think it's easier to write the final song of the album, right? And I think when you hear the whole album and hear the last song of the album, you will it makes sense that that song was the last song and it was kind of planned that way. But for an opener, it's always a little bit harder. And I think at the end of the day, once the album is written and you can hear all the songs, and usually it even takes until the album is fully mixed that I or we can make a decision that we feel, okay, this song is a strong opener. With this particular song, we chose it because it's kind of one of our more straightforward and songs, and it has a lot of more classical death metal elements to it. So it just felt like a energetic way to open the album. But we at the same point we chose it to be our last single because it doesn't necessarily give the full picture of what the album really is. And so we tried to paint a really broad picture with our singles and just wanted for our last single to be a very effective, aggressive song.
Yeah. How do you guys decide on the singles that you're going to put out? Like, do you do like a band vote? Like, how hard is that?
Um, usually it's just someone makes some suggestions, someone in the band will make some suggestions. And this time around, I had kind of picked out those 4 songs, and we and gave some thoughts about why I think they would be good singles, and then we discussed it and decided on the order of the songs. And you know I could say that with the singles we've put out for this album so far, with the first single, we wanted to put out something that is very representative of what the album is, and what the band is. And then with the second single, we immediately threw a curveball because it was a very primitive industrial metal kind of song. And so yeah, it's I think for us, we're trying to just paint a really broad picture. But it's always, I don't know, I think it's always kind of hard to really do it right, because everybody who listens to the music at the end of the day has their own subjective experience. And so you never really know how people will take to the songs that you put out into the order of the songs. But so yeah, I mean, ultimately it's just it has to work for us, I guess.
Yeah, I'm guessing when you go and go on the road and play songs live, maybe you'll discover which one like becomes fan favorites in
For
that way.
sure.
Maybe you'll be like, yeah, it was none of the singles, it was this other track. So the first single was it? I'm trying to read it correctly. Was it Tauf Behel? Was that the first
So
single?
that was the second single,
That's the one
Taufbefehl.
that's very, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
and
weird name. What does that mean?
it basically translates to baptizing orders. So the song,
Okay.
it's kind of derived from the term shooting orders, right? But it's so the topic of the song is basically forcing religion on people, right?
Yeah.
And we just kind of use the symbolism of baptism, as it just made for a good title too. I mean, in German anyway, if you do understand it or if you do translate it, it just makes for a very oppressive kind of image, and I think that was a good way to kind of tell a little bit of the story of what the song is about.
No, yeah, I totally agree with and using baptism that's people are being baptized when they're babies. So yeah, it is forced upon, and
Yeah.
you should have put that on Holy Friday.
Right.
That would have been like a great promotional. So yeah,
That is
and that has more of that industrial tinge. Like
yeah.
which industrial bands influenced that? Because obviously you're doing some experimentation. Instead of being brutally death metal, you have some industrial elements to it. What inspired you for the industrial?
So I've for a very long time, since I was, I don't know, in my late teens, I've been a big Godflesh fan, for example.
Nice.
And over the years, old Pitch Shifter. I just recently rediscovered this band Meat Hook Seed, which was a side project of Napalm Death, Obituary, and so on members, that is also kind of like a very 90s metal sounding band, but also has industrial elements. And in recent years, there's this project called Static Bloom, and they put out an album, trying to think what it's called. I could look it up real quick, but that album was like a much more modern sounding industrial album. Oh, the album is called Asphyxia. So Static Bloom, Asphyxia. It's way more industrial. It's not very metal. Yeah, it's incredible. It's yeah, it's modern. It's kind of, it's like modern, but you can hear a lot of classic industrial influences, and it's just a phenomenal production by Sanford Parker, who also produces a lot of metal. So it's a very interesting melting pot of sounds, but that's been one of the more recent industrial albums that really struck a chord with me. But yeah, generally the influences are a little bit more old school, I guess. Yeah, Swans, Godflesh, Pitch Shifter, you name it.
No, but it's good to have that variety in death metal and not just have like one sound. And I was reading that most of the guitars were recorded in your studio, right? I was reading the press release about the guitar. Tell me about that process of your studio and laying down guitar. What's your process on that?
So typically the writing and recording goes hand in hand for us. At the time, most of the guitars were recorded. I still lived in Florida, and our drummer came over from Germany for a couple of weeks, and we just sat down in my studio and started writing songs. And usually what I do is I try to immediately record the guitars as, you know, clean as possible, so I don't have to go back and re-record everything when finishing up the album. So it kind of went hand in hand. And then after I wrote about half of the album with Paul, I then flew out here to Portland, and our other guitarist Keith actually has a really, really awesome studio in his house, a much bigger studio than I had at the time. And I, you know, brought all the tracks over, and we also started writing on new stuff and recorded the guitars there. And then at the end, when everything was said and done, the drums were recorded in Germany at a studio, and then we had to fuse everything, which was quite complicated. You know, it was just a lot of effort trying to make everything fit right. And I don't ever want to do it the same way again. Like next time, I want to record in one place if possible. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're all very experienced with recording ourselves in home studio environments, especially guitars and vocals is something that Nightmare has always recorded in home studio environments. So it's not new to us, really. We're very comfortable with doing a lot of that work ourselves. And the only thing we really need help with is drum recordings and, you know, the mixing and mastering. Keith is a good mixing engineer. I've actually been a mastering engineer since 2008. However, I don't love mastering my own music because I feel like at some point I'm just so into the project that I lose the neutrality sometimes, you know, like you just get overwhelmed with everything and it becomes kind of a mush. So I like to just give it away at some point. And luckily we have a really talented mixing and mastering engineer who has mixed and mastered both of our albums.
Yeah. Are you harder on yourself when you're doing the mastering, if you're doing it yourself and it's your own music?
It's hard to say. I don't know if I'm harder on myself. I just feel like after working at everything for so long, I just feel like I have a hard time being objective, or maybe I'm starting to, you know, my ears have tuned into it so much that I just don't know if I'm still objective enough to also make a good mastering. So it's kind of a matter of principle. Sometimes on like smaller releases, two of the EPs we have recorded in the past, I did mastering on. And on an EP, it's a little bit easier because the process of recording isn't as long, and not all of it was recorded in my studio. So I think EPs are easier for me to pull off, but albums, you worked so much at an album, you know, at some point I also don't want to do it anymore.
No, yeah, and I think it's good that you bring like fresh ears.
Yes.
Maybe they'll listen to something that maybe you've heard so much times that you didn't pay attention. They'll give you like, it will be better if we do this. So
correct.
Yeah, so it's better. So let me show the album artwork for the upcoming album. Here is Nightmare with the album cover for Deformity, Adrift. So this is a very cool album artwork. Who did this, and like, what are you trying to represent with this artwork?
So it's actually an interesting story. The piece was made by an artist called Jun, and they are based out of Berlin, and they're a contemporary composer, and we've worked together on music in the past, and they just also happen to be a really talented artist. And with this cover, actually, in late 2018, I was on John's Facebook page, and they had posted this artwork for sale. And this is the first time in my life that I ever bought an artwork without having imagined, whatever it's supposed to be. It was just like I saw it, and then I showed it the rest of the band, and everybody was blown away by it. And we just decided then and there, okay, let's buy this piece of art. And then we had it laying around for a couple of years, and it ended up, usually what happens is you write an album, and then based on, you know, uh, your interpretation of the lyrics or whatever, you create an idea for an album artwork, and then you go to an artist and ask them to do that for you. This time around, it almost worked the other way around, where we looked at the artwork and felt inspired to write some lyrics. The song, what is it? The song "Suffering Beyond Death." It's like kind of the halfway point of the album. The lyrics for that song are directly inspired by some of the imagery in the art. We also put out a single in 2020 called "Primordial Grid." That was also, the lyrics for that were also partially inspired by this artwork. And so, yeah, it was just kind of backwards this time, with this artwork. But it kind of created a different flow of inspiration.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that the artwork actually inspired the album. So you have the artwork first, and you said we have this amazing piece of art, which is an amazing piece of art, and
Yeah.
it really, what the image that we saw, it really fits the music, because
Right.
this is brutal death metal with some modern twists. It's like a 32-minute album. So yeah, it's pretty old school, but it has that modern production style. So so guys are getting ready to release the album now in May 5th through your own record label. What are the plans that you have once you release the album? Are there some shows on the way?
Yeah, we're actually currently in the process of lining up some release shows for mid-May in the area here. It looks like we're going to play one in Seattle and one in Portland. We are also talking to some bands about tours in Europe and the US, but we haven't really solidified anything. Just some options that we're kind of exploring. But yeah, generally speaking, we do want, with Nightmare, we toured one time right before the pandemic. We toured in 2019, and it was a great tour with Dark Funeral, Belphegor, and Incantation. So it was a really stacked
Great
bill, and it
lineup,
was,
yeah.
yeah, it was a great lineup. And and then we kind of started getting ready to write a new album, and we did. And then the pandemic hit, so it just kind of pulled the brakes on us. And yeah, so now we're basically trying to get back into that. We're trying to get back into touring. But at the same time, we're also already thinking about the next release that we want to work on. We have a lot of ideas, and started tinkering with some different sounds. So whatever happens, we're just kind of excited to keep working on, whatever really happens for us, and whether that's touring or recording the next piece of music already, we'll see.
Maybe you'll find a new artwork that will inspire.
Exactly.
The new, that could be a trend. You could be the band that get the artwork first and then write music. So yeah, it's really interesting album, and I must say your room is awesome. That's like the ultimate like man cave, right there. You have, how many records do you have?
I think about 2000.
Wow. And you like every type of genre, or mostly like metal stuff?
It is overwhelmingly metal and extreme metal, but also a lot of hardcore and punk. Some like old school hip hop from the 90s. You know, I grew up listening to a lot of hip hop, like New York hip hop stuff like Wu-Tang and Gangstar. So it's
That's the true hip hop, the one from the
yeah,
90s.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it will never be topped for me. So yeah, I do like 90s hip hop as well.
Yeah,
Because yeah, it was good music. I think the 90s was an amazing era because like there was a lot of like variety in all the music and a lot of experimentation that I think sadly I don't know if we'll ever have 10 years like of music like the 90s.
I
Like
do I do agree. I think even it's interesting because even in the metal space and in the rock space, a lot of new things happened, and it seemed like
yeah.
there was a potential for commercial success even for weird stuff, you know, like uh so I don't know. I feel like that's very hard nowadays. It seems like if you really try to make it big and have commercial success, you kind of have to stick to a very radio friendly formula, you know, very catchy and major harmony kind of rock choruses and whatnot. But yeah, the 90s were very adventurous and so much different stuff happened, you know, like you got on one end you had Pantera, then you had Nirvana, then you had The Prodigy, you know, like it
Yeah.
was very, very diverse and very a lot of cool stuff coming out of very different directions.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah,
had
it's
ska music also
yeah,
being
I mean,
popular.
yeah,
You had the hip hop, you had
yeah,
the new metal, you had the pop
hmm,
punk, you like industrial. Like I
yeah,
remember when Nine Inch Nails hit it like super big in 1994.
yeah,
So yeah, it's a great era in music. And sadly, like I was watching a video on YouTube, like this big YouTuber, and he's hearing the top 10 songs of the world right now.
yeah,
And out of those top 10 songs, like almost five sounded identical.
yeah,
They had like the same beat.
yes.
And you're like, how can they all sound the same. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like you guys, like you said, like the 90s had a lot of experimentation. I don't know, and weird was accepted.
Yes.
It was because the 80s, people say, oh, the 80s was the best. The 80s had a lot of cheesy music. There's
Hmm.
some great metal albums from the 80s, but there's a lot of crap too. But I think the 90s, I think it had the most experimentation. So yeah,
Yeah.
so for I would recommend Nightmare for the people who haven't listened to it. So people who like old school death metal with some like new tendencies, I think they would like it. And you know it's coming out on May 5th. I'll put I know you're putting out your own burial. Like how many variants of vinyl are you guys putting out for this release?
So there is three. One's already sold out. Then we have a splatter vinyl that's also almost sold out, and a third color. But we also collaborated with a European label, so we're not handling the European release ourselves. That is done by Vendetta Records out of Berlin, which is an old friend of mine. And they have also their three own vinyl variants. So in all technicality, there's six variants out there, but it's three that are sold from Europe and three that are sold from over here.
Yeah, you know the hardcore fans will try to get all six.
Yeah,
There's
indeed,
people that are
indeed.
so into it that will get the six variants.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
I've seen a couple people have hit me up that they ordered everything, and I'm always I'm always stoked to see that. It's, you know, I used to do that for my favorite bands. There was a time where I had every available color of Obscura by Gorguts, you know, but at some point I stopped buying multiple or like several different colors of the same thing. But
because you
I
have to
always
eat,
yes, I have to eat. I have, you know,
you have to pay rent.
other passions too, you know,
Yeah.
that cost money. So it's just like, yeah, okay, I have to rein it in a little bit. But I'm always, I think there's no greater honor than someone who is so into your music that they're willing to buy every format, you know, or every vinyl color. I'm always very, very happy when that happens.
yeah, I would feel very humble. Like, wow, you
Yes.
spend so much, and
Yeah.
and I'm guessing they'll only listen to one, and the other ones they'll keep it like in the box because like, uh,
Possibly, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I know that Simon, you have to pack, uh,
Yes.
so you have to go to Nam. But I hope you have a great weekend over there. Should be awesome. If I was over there, I would love to go. Like, unfortunately, I'm not a musician, but I love music. So I'm a music lover. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would be like so cool, and I think it's a musician's dream to go there. So there's lots of musicians that haven't been able to go there. So I'm sure it will be a fun weekend.
For sure. And you know what? Last time I was at NAM, I actually did some promo work for Nightmare too. There are actually music journalists there too. So I'm sure you could connect with some people to see if you could get into the convention and, use the opportunity to interview some musicians. It definitely was like that last time. So,
Yeah,
you
first
know,
I gotta I'm in Puerto Rico, so I gotta I gotta
yeah,
buy a plane ticket. But yeah,
yeah,
maybe next year that would be awesome to interview some musicians and do like a
yeah,
video talking to different people. So yeah. So people, the Nightmare album is coming out on May 5th. Please pre-order it. I'll put the links and I'll put some of the clips of I'll put the like a link to a video so you guys can listen to some of the singles that are already out. So,
excellent.
Simon, you have a great flight to Los Angeles. And
Thank you.
people, until next time, this
All
is
right. Thank you.
Hector, the
Thank you
Children
for the
Couch.
interview.
Yeah, and I'll see you all right here on the couch.
All
Thank
right.
you. Good
Bye.
night.